After the first invasions, the fires never truly went out. Battlefields hardened into trenches, forests into fortresses of fog and mud.
Help me up.
The Jedi lines held, disciplined and unmoving, while the Brotherhood's victories yielded no resolution, only more ground to maintain. Losses mounted quietly on both sides, bodies and machines consumed without progress. The war refused to conclude.
Their outer lines haven't moved in days.
They're burning power to keep them there.
Shield coverage is uneven. See these gaps?
They close them as soon as we test them. Someone's holding the pieces together.
If that control breaks, the war ends fast, one way or the other.
They said the line would break by now.
It hasn't.
That means they're changing something.
Or someone. Let's go.
Command's holding rotations longer.
Then we hold longer.
Rotation was supposed to thin them out.
It has, just not the way Command expected.
The forward shield nodes are overheating again. They were never meant to stay active this long. If they drop, the Republic will see the gaps. Then keep them alive at any cost. The relays are back online, but they won't hold much longer.
Then the war ends before they fail.
The war on Ruusan did not end with conquest. It only slowed, thickened, and sank into the world itself. Sith camps filled with the wounded. Commanders searched for answers that never came, and faith in overwhelming numbers began to erode. Control tightened. Unity was enforced. What once felt like strength became weight. The Brotherhood still stood together, but standing together now cost more than it returned.
Lord Khan?
Hold the line. Unity will end this war.
They misunderstand what unity means.
We outnumber them, we outlast them.
Then why does it feel like the war is closing in instead of ending?
Because this world demands conclusion.
And we intend to give it one.
They're not advancing. Lord Hoth, do we continue rotations? The Sith believe power ends wars. We will prove endurance does. Just hold.
And within that unending pressure, as Ruusan devoured patience and certainty alike, another presence began to move toward the war. Not to fight it, but to understand it. When he arrived, he did not join the charge. He watched. The Brotherhood marched forward because it knew no other direction, blind to the fact that every step diluted what little strength remained. While others shouted triumph, Dessel remained silent, seeing only exhaustion dressed as unity. As the war dragged on, command began to fracture. Khan felt control slipping, not through defeat, but through strain. Among the Dark Lords, doubt surfaced quietly, unspoken but shared. Orders grew sharper, more desperate. Unity was no longer inspired, it was enforced. Sith turned against Sith openly now, authority colliding instead of flowing. And in that collapse of command, Dxun saw the end with absolute clarity. Whispers of an ancient solution resurfaced, fragments of a ritual remembered not as history, but as salvation. Khan embraced finality, mistaking extinction for transcendence. The Brotherhood accepted the doctrine not because it was wise, but because it was complete. Faith replaced reason, and preparation gave way to inevitability. What they built was not a weapon of war, but a solution that consumed the problem by consuming everything. When the Sith gathered one last time, it was not to rule, but to disappear. And in that moment, Dxun made his choice. He did not argue, he did not warn, he walked away. Step by step, he put distance between himself and the ritual, between survival and obedience. As the chamber sealed and belief reached its peak, Dxun stood apart, waiting. Not in fear, not in doubt, but in certainty. This was the moment before silence.
Convergence state ready. Secondary failsafes disengaged. Ritual core synchronized. Final authorization required. Final authorization required. Final authorization confirmed. Convergence initiated.
Across the galaxy, the shock was felt. Jedi paused mid-breath, sensing a vast emptiness where thousands of voices had been. Not destruction, not chaos. Only a void, so complete it could not be questioned. The Force screamed across Ruusan, not as sound, but as annihilation. In a single instant, every living presence within reach was torn away, leaving silence where will and purpose had existed moments before. When the echo faded, the battlefield remained, but life did not. Records were sealed. The Sith were declared extinct. History closed the chapter and moved on, confident the darkness had ended itself. One survived where the many failed. From the ashes of Ruusan, a single will endured. One who understood the truth the Brotherhood never could. The war ended, and the galaxy moved on. Worlds rebuilt, borders stabilized, and life resumed its familiar rhythm. For most, the conflict became history. Within the Jedi Temple, the war was finalized. Records were closed, Holocron sealed. The conflict was categorized, resolved, and set aside. In the Senate, declarations followed. The new Sith Wars were declared over. Stability was proclaimed restored. And then the final judgment was made. The Sith were declared extinct. But belief is not truth. Far from the core worlds, beyond corrupted wilderness and forgotten paths, one survivor remained. He did not rebuild. He did not strike. He vanished. Silence became his defense. Isolation his strength. No witnesses followed him. No traces remained. He traveled without identity, through places where names held no meaning, and history was never asked.
Out of service.
On Somov Rit, the war had never truly ended. Industry lay dead, settlements fractured, and survival replaced hope. Among them was a child untouched by fear. She moved through ruin with calm familiarity. Her mind hardened rather than broken. Anger lived within her. Unfocused, contained, waiting. When pressure demanded response, strength surfaced without training, and the world answered before she understood why. That moment did not go unnoticed. Their first encounter passed without words. He remained distant. She sensed something without knowing what it was. Power revealed itself unintentionally. Emotion escaped restraint, and the environment responded. Pain followed, but it did not weaken her. It sharpened her. Then control emerged. Anger was no longer leaking. It was being used. The world responded not with chaos, but with balance. The test was never spoken, but it had begun. The offer was made without promise. No reward was described, no future guaranteed. Only the suggestion of a path, spoken without explanation. She was not told who he was, nor what he intended. The test began before she realized it had started. When she chose to leave, there was no farewell. She did not look back. The past was not mourned. It was severed. On Ambria, instruction began without mercy. No lessons were explained. No techniques demonstrated. Persist beyond death. Ancient echoes confirmed it had been attempted before. Sith who refused to fade had left scars rather than legacies. Names erased, records destroyed, knowledge fragmented by betrayal and fear. Across the Force, distant worlds answered that realization. Residual shadows, where the Darkside lingered long after abandonment. Among those fragments, one name endured where others had been erased. Andeddu, a Sith bound to forbidden survival, his legacy deliberately buried. The trail led to places the Jedi refused to touch. Worlds left unguarded, not cleansed, abandoned to rot in silence. Preparations were made without witnesses, no records, no traces. Departure itself became erasure. Dxun revealed itself as a living crucible, a moon where the jungle hunted, where life had been shaped by constant predation and Darkside saturation. And beneath the canopy, older than the Republic itself, ruins lay entombed in growth. Creatures born of darkness sensed what Bane carried within him. They did not resist him. They claimed him. The Orbalisks attached, anchoring themselves through pain so severe it stripped away time and thought. Agony became constant, reshaping endurance into permanence. flesh should have failed, living armor formed instead, organic, relentless, inseparable. Zannah watched and understood. Power that could not be removed might one day refuse to yield. In Bane's triumph, she saw limitation, and in that realization, the first seed of doubt took root. Bane learned that flesh, no matter how hardened, would always fail. On Dxun, he bound himself to pain and survival, trading freedom for protection. On Prakith, the search turned from survival to knowledge. In a vault meant to be forgotten, Bane claimed a Holocron that survived by deception rather than defense. Andeddu's legacy offered eternity through domination of essence, but at the cost of stagnation. Immortality preserved the self, but destroyed the future.
To exist beyond death, another must cease to exist. Completely. You wear suffering as protection. Effective. Temporary. What I offer is not safety. It is continuation. Those who seek eternity must accept that nothing else may endure. Not allies. Not students. Not legacies. Decide what must survive.
The rule tightened, not to grant safety, but to ensure evolution through conflict. Master and Apprentice did not walk the same path, and that distance was deliberate.